What were the goals of the Montreal Protocol?
The Montreal Protocol was signed in 1987 by members of the United Nations to phase out and reduce production of CFCs and other ozone-damaging chemicals by 50% by 1998. Amendments and revisions to the Montreal Protocol were made in 1990, 1992, and 1997 to include other chemicals and accelerate the phase-out of certain chemicals. Production of CFCs, carbon tetrachloride, and methyl chloroform was phased out by 1996 in the United States and other highly developed countries.
From what type of stone was Mount Rushmore National Memorial carved?
Granite. The monument, in the Black Hills of southwestern South Dakota, depicts the 60-foot-high, 18-meter-high, faces of 4 United States presidents: George Washington, 1732 to 1799; Thomas Jefferson, 1743 to 1826; Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865, and Theodore Roosevelt, 1858 to 1919. Sculptor Gutzon Borglum, 1867 to 1941, designed the monument, but died before the completion of the project. His son, Lincoln, finished it. From 1927 to 1941, 360 people, mostly construction workers, drillers, and miners, carved the figures using dynamite.
What special significance does the passion flower have?
Spanish friars of the 16th century first gave the name to this flower. They saw in the form of the passion flower, passiflora, a representation of the Passion of Christ. The flowers have 5 petals and 5 sepals, which was thought to symbolize the 10 faithful apostles present at the crucifixion. The corona of 5 filaments was believed to resemble Christ's crown of thorns. The 5 stamens represented the 5 wounds in Christ's body, and the 3 stigmas stood for the nails driven into his hands and feet. Most species of passion flower are native to the tropical areas of the Western Hemisphere.
Which state was the first to officially name a state bird?
In 1926, Kentucky officially named the cardinal as its state bird.
What is the Internet?
The Internet is the world's largest computer network. It links computer terminals together via wires or telephone lines in a web of networks and shared software. With the proper equipment, an individual can access vast amounts of information and Search databases on various computers connected to the Internet. Or communicate with someone located anywhere in the world as long as he or she has the proper equipment. Originally created in the late 1960s by the U.S. Department of Defense's Advanced Research Projects Agency. DARPA, to share information with other researchers. The Internet expanded immensely when scientists and academics using the network discovered its great value. Despite its origin, however, the Internet is not owned or funded by the U.S. government or any other organization or institution. A group of volunteers, the Internet Society, addresses such issues as daily operations and technical standards.
What are some interesting features of jellyfishes?
Jellyfishes live close to the shores of most oceans and spend most of their time floating near the surface. Jellyfishes have bell-shaped bodies that are between 95% and 96% water. They have a muscular ring around the margin of the bell that contracts rhythmically to propel them through the water. Jellyfishes are carnivores, subduing their prey with stinging tentacles and drawing the paralyzed animal into the digestive cavity. Jellyfishes are gelatinous. You can see through their bodies.
What is the most widely cultivated cereal in the world?
Wheat is the most widely cultivated cereal in the world. The grain supplies a major percentage of the nutrients needed by the world's population. Wheat is one of the oldest domesticated plants, and it has been argued that it laid the foundation for Western civilization. Domesticated wheat had its origins in the Near East at least 9,000 years ago. Wheat grows best in temperate grassland biomes that receive 12 to 36 inches, 30 to 90 centimeters, of rain per year and have relatively cool temperatures. Some of the top wheat-producing countries are Argentina, Canada, China, India, the Ukraine, and the United States.
What are X-rays?
X-rays are electromagnetic radiation with short wavelengths, 10 to 3 nanometers, and a great amount of energy. They were discovered in 1898 by William Conrad Röntgen, 1845 to 1923. X-rays are frequently used in medicine because they are able to pass through opaque, dense structures such as bone and form an image on a photographic plate. They are especially helpful in assessing damage to bones, identifying certain tumors, and examining the chest, heart and lungs and abdomen. A major disadvantage of X-rays as a diagnostic tool is that they provide little information about the soft tissues, since they only show a flat, two-dimensional picture. They cannot distinguish between the various layers of an organ. some of which may be healthy while others may be diseased.
What are the uses for chromatography?
Chromatography is used to separate and identify the chemicals in a mixture. It is useful to separate and identify the chemicals in a mixture, check the purity of a chemical product, identify impurities in a product, and purify a chemical product, on a laboratory or industrial scale.
Is the whale shark a mammal or a fish?
The whale shark, Rhynchodon typus, is a shark, not a whale. It is, therefore, a fish. This species name merely indicates that it is the largest of all shark species. Weighing 40,000 pounds 18,144 kilograms or more and growing. To lengths of 49 feet 15 meters or more, and the largest fish species in the world. However, it is completely harmless to humans.
Are there any natural predators of gypsy moth caterpillars?
About 45 kinds of birds, squirrels, chipmunks, and white-footed mice eat this cereus. Insect pest. Among the 13 imported natural enemies of the moth, 2 flies, Compis luricinata, a tachnid fly, and Sternia scutellata, parasitize the caterpillar. Other parasites and various wasps have also been tried as controls, as well as spraying and male sterilization.
What is the Milky Way?
The Milky Way is a hazy band of light that can be seen encircling the night sky. This light comes from the stars that make up the Milky Way galaxy. The galaxy to which the Sun and Earth belong. Galaxies are huge systems of stars separated from one another by largely empty space. Astronomers estimate that the Milky Way galaxy contains at least 100 billion stars and is about 100,000 light-years in diameter. The galaxy is shaped like a compact disk with a central bulge, or nucleus, and spiral arms curving out from the center.
Why is it difficult to remember dreams?
Almost all dreams occur during rapid eye movement, REM, sleep. It appears that the content of dreams is stored in short-term memory and cannot be transferred into long-term memory unless they are somehow articulated. Sleep studies show that when individuals who believe they never dream are awakened at various intervals during the night, they are in the middle of a dream.
Which species of mosquito causes malaria and yellow fever in humans?
The bite of the female mosquito of the genus Anopheles can contain the parasite of the genus Plasmodium, which causes malaria, a serious tropical infectious disease affecting 200 to 300 million people worldwide. More than 1 million African babies and children die from the disease annually. The Aedes aegypti mosquito transmits yellow fever, a serious infectious disease characterized by jaundice, giving the patient yellowish skin. 10% of the patients die.
How do scientific laws differ from theories?
A scientific law is a statement of how something in nature behaves, which has proven to be true every time it is tested. Unlike the general usage of the term theory, which often means an educated guess. A scientific theory explains a phenomenon that is based on observation, experimentation, and reasoning. Scientific laws do not become theories. A scientific theory may explain a law, but theories do not become laws.
How are coral reefs formed and how fast are they built?
Coral reefs grow only in warm, shallow water. The calcium carbonate skeletons of dead corals serve as a framework, upon which layers of successively younger animals attach themselves. Such accumulations, combined with rising water levels, slowly lead to the formation of reefs that can be hundreds of meters deep and long. The coral animal, or polyp, has a columnar form. Its lower end is attached to the hard floor of the reef, while the upper end is free to extend into the water. A whole colony consists of thousands of individuals. There are two kinds of corals, hard and soft, depending on the type of skeleton secreted. The polyps of hard corals deposit around themselves a solid skeleton of calcium carbonate, chalk, so most swimmers see only the skeleton of the coral. The animal is in a cup-like formation into which it withdraws during the daytime. The major reef builder in Florida and Caribbean waters, Montas triangularis. Star coral, requires about 100 years to form a reef just 3 feet, 1 meter, high.
Why do people need sleep?
Scientists do not know exactly why people need sleep, but studies show that sleep is necessary for survival. Sleep appears to be necessary for the nervous system to work properly. While too little sleep one night may leave us feeling drowsy and unable to concentrate the next day. A prolonged period of too little sleep leads to impaired memory and physical performance. Hallucinations and mood swings may develop if sleep deprivation continues.
What is pelvic inflammatory disease?
Pelvic inflammatory disease, PID, is a term used for a group of infections in the female organs, including inflammations of the fallopian tubes, cervix, uterus, and ovaries. It is the most common cause of female infertility today. PID is most often found in sexually active women under the age of 25 and almost always results from gonorrhea or chlamydia. But women who use intrauterine devices, IUDs, are also at risk.
What is the science of chaos?
Chaos or chaotic behavior is the behavior of a system whose final state depends very sensitively on the initial conditions. The behavior is unpredictable and cannot be distinguished from a random process, even though it is strictly determinate in a mathematical sense. Chaos studies the complex and irregular behavior of many systems in nature, such as changing weather patterns, flow of turbulent fluids, and swinging pendulums. Scientists once thought they could make exact predictions about such systems, but found that a tiny difference in starting conditions can lead to greatly different results. Chaotic systems do obey certain rules, which mathematicians have described with equations. But the science of chaos demonstrates the difficulty of predicting the long-range behavior of chaotic systems.
How much of Earth's surface is covered with ice?
About 10% of the world's land surface is glaciated, or permanently covered with ice. Approximately 5,712,800 square miles, 14,800,000 square kilometers, are covered by ice in the form of ice sheets, ice caps, or glaciers. An ice sheet is a body of ice that blankets an area of land, completely covering its mountains and valleys. Ice sheets have an area of over 19,000 square miles, 50,000 square kilometers. Ice caps are smaller. Glaciers are larger masses of ice that flow, under the force of gravity, at a rate of between 10 and 1,000 feet, 3 to 300 meters, per year. Glaciers on steep slopes flow faster.
Is it possible to count to infinity?
No. Very large finite numbers are not the same as infinite numbers. Infinite numbers are defined as being unbounded, or without limit. Any number that can be reached by counting or by representation of a number followed by billions of zeros is a finite number.
What are killer bees?
Africanized honeybees. The term entomologists prefer rather than killer bees are a hybrid originating in Brazil, where African honeybees were imported in 1956. The breeders, hoping to produce a bee better suited to producing more honey in the tropics, instead found that African bees soon hybridized with and mostly displaced the familiar European honeybees. Although they produce more honey, Africanized honeybees, Apis mellifera scutellata, also are more dangerous than European bees because they attack intruders in greater numbers. Since their introduction, they have been responsible for approximately 1,000 human deaths. In addition to such safety issues, concern is growing regarding the effect of possible hybridization on the U.S. beekeeping industry. In October 1990, the bees crossed the Mexican border into the United States. They reached Arizona in 1993. In 1996, 6 years after their arrival in the United States, Africanized honeybees could be found in parts of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California. As of 2009, Africanized honeybees are also found in Nevada, Utah, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Their migration northward has slowed partially because they are a tropical insect and cannot live in colder climates. Experts have suggested two possible ways of limiting the spread of the Africanized honeybees. The first is drone flooding, a process by which large numbers of European drones are kept in areas where commercially reared European queen bees mate, thereby ensuring that only limited mating occurs between Africanized drones and European queens. The second method is frequent requeening, in which a beekeeper replaces a colony's queen with one of his or her own choosing. The beekeeper can then be assured that the queens are European and that they have already mated with European drones.
How does the temperature of the Earth change as one goes deeper underground?
The Earth's temperature increases with depth. Measurements made in deep mines and drill holes indicate that the rate of temperature increase varies from place to place in the world, ranging from 59 degrees to 167 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 to 75 degrees Celsius, per kilometer in depth. Actual temperature measurements cannot be made beyond the deepest drill holes, which are a little more than 6.2 miles, 10 kilometers, deep. Estimates suggest that the temperatures at Earth's center can reach values of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit 2,760 degrees Celsius or higher.
How do hardwoods differ from softwoods?
Hardwood and softwood are terms used commercially to distinguish woods. Hardwoods are the woods of dicots, regardless of how hard or soft they are, while softwoods are the woods of conifers. Many hardwoods come from the tropics, while almost all softwoods come from the forests of the northern temperate zone.
How deadly is Amanita phalloides?
The poisonous mushroom Amanita phalloides has a fatality rate of about 50%. Ingestion of part of one mushroom may be sufficient to cause death. Over 100 fatalities occur each year from eating poisonous mushrooms, with more than 90% caused by the Amanita phalloides group.
What is the greatest amount of rainfall ever measured?
The table below summarizes the places that experienced the greatest amount of rainfall and just how much was measured.
What are halcyon days?
This term is often used to refer to a time of peace or prosperity. Among sailors, it is the 2-week period of calm weather before and after the shortest day of the year. Approximately December 21st. The phrase is taken from halcyon, the name the ancient Greeks gave to the kingfisher. According to legend, the halcyon built its nest on the surface of the ocean and was able to quiet the winds while its eggs were hatching.
What is spectroscopy?
Spectroscopy includes a range of techniques to study the composition, structure, and bonding of elements and compounds. The different methods of spectroscopy use different wavelengths of the electromagnetic spectrum to study atoms, molecules, ions, and the bonding between them.
What is acid rain?
Acid deposition is the fallout of acidic compounds in solid, liquid, or gaseous forms. Wet deposition occurs as precipitation while dry deposition is the fallout of particulate matter. Acid rain is the best known form of acid deposition. The term acid rain was coined by British chemist Robert Angus Smith, 1817 to 1884, who, in 1872, published Air and Rain, The Beginnings of a Chemical Climatology. Since then, acid rain has become an increasingly used term for rain, snow, sleet, or other precipitation that has been polluted by acids such as sulfuric and nitric acids. When gasoline, coal, or oil are burned, their waste products of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide combine in complex chemical reactions with water vapor in clouds to form acids. The United States alone discharges 40 million metric tons of sulfur and nitrogen oxides into the atmosphere. This, combined with natural emissions of sulfur and nitrogen compounds, has resulted in severe ecological damage. Hundreds of lakes in North America, especially northeastern Canada and United States, and in Scandinavia are so acidic that they cannot support fish life. Crops, forests, and building materials, such as marble, limestone, sandstone, and bronze, have been affected as well, but the extent is not as well documented. However, in Europe, where so many living trees are stunted or killed, the new word Waldsterben, forest death, has been coined to describe this new phenomenon. In 1990, amendments to the U.S. Clean Air Act contained provisions to control emissions that cause acid rain. It included the reductions of sulfur dioxide emissions from 19 million tons to 9.1 million tons annually, and the reduction of industrial nitrogen oxide emissions from 6 to 4 million tons annually.
What is the safest way to view a solar eclipse?
Punch a pinhole in an index card and hold it 2 to 3 feet, 0.6 to 0.9 meters, in front of another index card. The eclipse can be viewed safely through the hole. Encase the index card contraption in a box, using aluminum foil with a pinhole, and you'll see a sharper image of the eclipse. You may also purchase special glasses with aluminized mylar lenses. Damage to the retina can occur if the eclipse is viewed with other devices such as photographic filters, exposed film, smoked glass, camera lenses, telescopes, or binoculars.
What is a solar flare?
A solar flare is a sudden, intense release of energy in the sun's outer atmosphere. The magnetic energy of a solar flare is released in the form of radiation. At speeds of 1 million miles per hour, 1.6 kilometers per hour. The amount of energy released is equivalent to millions of 100 megaton hydrogen bombs exploding at the same time. The frequency of solar flares is coordinated with the sun's 11-year cycle. The number of solar flares is greatest at the peak of the solar cycle. Solar flares may be visible from Earth. The first solar flare observed and recorded was in 1859 by Richard C. Carrington, 1826 to 1875, who saw a sudden white light while observing sunspots.
Who was Alfred Russel Wallace?
Alfred Russel Wallace, 1823 to 1913, was a naturalist whose work was presented with Charles Darwin's at the Linnean Society of London in 1858. After extensive travels in the Amazon basin, Wallace independently came to the same conclusions as Darwin on the significance of natural selection in driving the diversification of species. Wallace also worked as a natural history specimen collector in Indonesia. Wallace, like Darwin, also read the work of Thomas Malthus, 1766 to 1834. During an attack of malaria in Indonesia, Wallace made the connection between the Malthusian concept of the struggle for existence and a mechanism for change within populations. From this, Wallace wrote the essay that was eventually presented with Darwin's work in 1858.
When and what was the first animal sent into orbit?
A small female dog named Laika, aboard the Soviet Sputnik 2, launched November 3, 1957. Was the first animal sent into orbit. This event followed the successful Soviet launch on October 4, 1957, of Sputnik 1. The first man-made satellite ever placed in orbit. Laika was placed in a pressurized compartment within a capsule that weighed 1,103 pounds, 500 kilograms. After a few days in orbit, she died, and Sputnik 2 re-entered Earth's atmosphere on April 14. 1958. Some sources list the dog as a Russian Samoyed Laika named Kutyevka or Lemenchik.
What is amber?
Amber is the fossil resin of trees. The two major deposits of amber are in the Dominican Republic and Baltic. Amber came from a coniferous tree that is now extinct. Amber is usually yellow or orange in color, semi-transparent or opaque with a glossy surface. It is used by both artisans and scientists.
Can artificial cells be made?
Research in progress at the National Aeronautical and Space Administration, NASA, is focused on cells as a means to deliver medicine in outer space. These cells are able to withstand dehydration and thus can be safely stored for long periods. Artificial cells are made of a polymer that acts like a cell membrane. But the polymer is stronger and more manageable than real membranes. These polymers are called polymersomes and can be made to cross-link with other polymers. Researchers think that many different kinds of molecules can be encapsulated within these polymersomes and then delivered to specific target organs. An example would be an artificial blood cell that not only delivers oxygen but also medication.
Who is the founder of the science of magnetism?
The English scientist William Gilbert, 1544 to 1603. Regarded Earth as a giant magnet and investigated its magnetic field in terms of dip and variation. He explored many other magnetic and electrostatic phenomena. The Gilbert, GB, a unit of magnetism, is named for him. John H. Van Vleck, 1899 to 1980. An American physicist, made significant contributions to modern magnetic theory. he explained the magnetic, electrical, and optical properties of many elements and compounds with the ligand field theory. Demonstrated the effect of temperature on paramagnetic materials. Called Van Vleck paramagnetism, and developed a theory on the magnetic properties of atoms and their components.
How long does it take for a discarded aluminum beverage can to be recycled and returned as a new beverage can?
A recycled aluminum beverage can return to the shelf as a new beverage can in as little as 60 days.
Is it possible to compare the energy efficiency of different brands of appliances?
In 1980, the Federal Trade Commission's appliance labeling rule became effective. It requires energy guide labels be placed on all new refrigerators, freezers, water heaters, dishwashers, clothes washers, room air conditioners, heat pumps, furnaces, and boilers. The bright yellow labels with black lettering identify energy consumption and operating cost for each of the various household appliances. Energy guide labels show the estimated yearly electricity consumption to operate the product along with a scale of comparison among similar products. The comparison scale shows the least and most energy used by comparable models.
What is the central processing unit of a computer?
The central processing unit, CPU, of a computer is where almost all computing takes place in all computers including mainframes, desktops, laptops, and servers. The CPU of almost every computer is contained on a single chip.
Why can't metal objects be placed in a microwave?
Metal objects should not be used in a microwave, except as directed by the manufacturer. Because the microwaves are reflected off these materials and do not allow the heat to penetrate the food. The oven could be damaged by an arc between the metal utensils and the cavity interior, or door assembly if the cooking load is not large enough to absorb the microwave energy.
What are the special organs of taste?
The special organs of taste are the taste buds located primarily on the surface of the tongue, where they are associated with tiny elevations called papillae surrounded by deep folds. A taste bud is a cluster of approximately 100 taste cells representing all taste sensations and 100 supporting cells that separate the taste cells. Taste buds can also be found on the roof of the mouth and in the throat. An adult has approximately 10,000 taste buds.
What was the first meal on the moon?
American astronauts Neil A. Armstrong and Edwin E. Aldrin Jr. ate 4 bacon squares, 3 sugar cookies, peaches, pineapple grapefruit drink, and coffee before their historic moonwalk on July 20, 1969.
Do all cells have a nucleus?
Prokaryotic cells do not have an organized nucleus. Most eukaryotic cells have a single organized nucleus. Red blood cells are the only mammalian cells that do not have a nucleus.
How does a plant become a fossil?
Fossilization is dependent upon where organisms grow and how quickly they are covered by sediment. Rarely do paleobotanists find the fossil remains of whole plants. Usually only fossilized parts of plants are found. Fossilization occurs in many different ways. 3 common methods of fossilization are compression, impression, and molding or casting. Compression fossils are often formed in water, where heavy sediment flattens leaves or other plant parts. The weight of the sediment squeezes out water present in the plant tissue, leaving only a thin film of tissue. An impression fossil is an imprint of an organism that is left behind when the organism's remains have been completely destroyed, leaving only the contour of the plant. Fossil molds and casts are formed when animal or plant tissues become surrounded by hardened sediment. The tissue then decays. The hollow negative created by the tissue is called a mold. When fossil molds fill with sediment over time, the sediment often conforms to the contours of the mold, resulting in a fossil called a cast.
What state was first to create mandatory deposits on beverage containers?
In 1971, the state of Oregon was the first to create legislation mandating deposits on beverage containers. The deposit was 5 cents per container.
Are cell phones dangerous to your health?
Scientific research has failed to show an association between exposure to radio frequency, energy from a cell phone and health problems. The results of one of the largest studies, released in 2010, of the health effects of cell phone usage found there was little or no health risk, including the development of brain tumors, from cell phone use.
Where are the organs of equilibrium located?
The organs of equilibrium are located in the inner ear. The otolith organs are located in the vestibule of the membranous labyrinth. They consist of sheets of hair cells covered by a membrane that contains otoliths. Ear stones, which are calcium carbonate crystals. The otolith organs sense linear acceleration of the head in any direction, such as acceleration due to changing the position of your head relative to gravity or acceleration in a car or amusement ride. The inner ear also contains horizontal, posterior, and anterior semicircular canals, which sense angular motions, acceleration, of the head. Each semicircular canal has a specialized sensory region that contains hair cells. And each canal is important for sensing rotation of the head in a different primary direction. For example, the horizontal semicircular canal receptors are sensitive to rotating the head leftward and rightward.
What is the world's highest waterfall?
Angel Falls, named after the explorer and bush pilot Jimmy Angel. On the Carao tributary in Venezuela is the highest waterfall in the world. It has a total height of 3,212 feet, 979 meters. With its longest unbroken drop being 2,648 feet, 807 meters. It is difficult to determine the height of a waterfall because many are composed of several sections rather than one straight drop. The highest waterfall in the United States is Yosemite Falls on a tributary of the Merced River in Yosemite National Park, California, with a total drop of 2,425 feet, 739 meters. There are three sections to the Yosemite Falls. Upper Yosemite is 1,430 feet, 435 meters. Cascades, middle portion, is 675 feet, 205 meters, and Lower Yosemite is 320 feet, 97 meters.
What is the most massive star?
The Pistol Star is both the brightest and most massive star known. Located 25,000 light-years away in the area of the constellation Sagittarius. This young, Oneto 3-million-year-old, star is as bright as 10 million suns and may have weighed 200 times the mass of the Sun at one point in its young life.
When will Niagara Falls disappear?
The water dropping over Niagara Falls digs great plunge pools at the base, undermining the shale cliff and causing the hard limestone cap to cave in. Niagara has eaten itself 7 miles, 11 kilometers, upstream since it formed 10,000 years ago. At this rate, it will disappear into Lake Erie in 22,800 years. The Niagara River connects Lake Erie with Lake Ontario and marks the U.S. Canada boundary, New York, Ontario.
Why was 1816 known as the year without a summer?
The eruption of Mount Tambora, a volcano in Indonesia. In 1815 threw billions of cubic yards of dust over 15 miles, 24 kilometers, into the atmosphere. Because the dust penetrated the stratosphere, wind currents spread it throughout the world. As a consequence of this volcanic activity, in 1816 normal weather patterns were greatly altered. Some parts of Europe and the British Isles experienced average temperatures 2.9 to 5.8 degrees Fahrenheit, 1.6 to 3.2 degrees Celsius, below normal. In New England, heavy snow fell between June 6 and June 11, and frost occurred in every month of 1816. Crop failures occurred in Western Europe and Canada as well as in New England. By 1817 the excess dust had settled and the climate returned to more normal conditions.
How much does the fetus grow during each month of pregnancy?
During the early weeks of development there is great change from embryo to fetus, but the overall size of the embryo is very small. As the pregnancy continues, weight gain and overall size become much more significant. Until the 20th week of pregnancy, length measurements are from the crown or top of the head to the rump. After the 20th week, the fetus is less curled up, and measurements are from the head to toe.
What is the route the fluid travels in the body?
Blood flows from the arteries to the capillaries, with a portion leaking into the interstitial spaces. Once the fluid leaves the interstitial spaces and enters the lymphatic capillaries, it is called lymph. It flows from the lymphatic capillaries through the lymphatic vessels and lymph nodes to the lymphatic ducts, eventually entering either the right lymphatic duct or the thoracic duct. It finally drains into the subclavian veins and is returned to the blood.
What are Koch's postulates?
Robert Koch was the first to identify that various microorganisms are the cause of disease. His four basic criteria of bacteriology, known as Koch's postulates, are still considered fundamental principles of bacteriology. The characteristics are as follows: 1. The organism must be found in tissues of animals that have been infected with the disease, rather than in disease-free animals. 2. The organism must be isolated from the diseased animal and grown in a pure culture or in vitro. 3. The cultured organism must be able to be transferred to a healthy animal. which will show signs of the disease after having been exposed to the organism. 4. The organism must be able to be isolated from the infected animal. Cook was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1905 for his research on tuberculosis.
Does hot water freeze faster than cold?
A bucket of hot water will not freeze faster than a bucket of cold water. However, a bucket of water that has been heated or boiled, then allowed to cool to the same temperature as the bucket of cold water, may freeze faster. Heating or boiling drives out some of the air bubbles in water. Because air bubbles cut down thermal conductivity, they can inhibit freezing. For the same reason, previously heated water forms denser ice than unheated water. Which is why hot water pipes tend to burst before cold water pipes.
How many gallons are in a barrel of oil?
The barrel, a common measure of crude oil, contains 42 U.S. gallons or 34.97 imperial gallons.
If 30 people are chosen at random, what is the probability that at least 2 of them have their birthday on the same day?
The probability that at least 2 people in a group of 30 share the same birthday is about 70%.
When was offshore drilling for oil first done?
The first successful offshore oil well was built off the coast at Summerland, Santa Barbara County, California, in 1896.
What is string theory?
A relatively recent theory in particle physics. String theory conceives elementary particles not as points but as lines or loops. The idea of these strings is purely theoretical since no string has ever been detected experimentally. The ultimate expression of string theory may potentially require a new kind of geometry, perhaps one involving an infinite number of dimensions.
Which medical condition is caused by the abnormal location of endometrial tissue?
Endometriosis is the abnormal location of uterine endometrial tissue. Under normal conditions, endometrial tissue only lines the uterus. But in some instances the tissue migrates to remote locations of the body such as the ovaries, pelvic peritoneum, the vagina, the bladder, or even the small intestine and lining of the chest cavity. Endometriosis is associated with dysmenorrhea, painful menstruation, pelvic pain, and infertility.
What is the greenhouse effect?
The greenhouse effect is a warming near Earth's surface that results when Earth's atmosphere traps the sun's heat. The atmosphere acts much like the glass walls and roof of a greenhouse. The effect was described by John Tyndall, 1820 to 1893, in 1861. It was given the greenhouse analogy much later in 1896 by the Swedish chemist Svante Arrhenius, 1859 to 1927. The greenhouse effect is what makes the Earth habitable. Without the presence of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and other gases in the atmosphere, too much heat would escape and the Earth would be too cold to sustain life. Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and other greenhouse gases absorb the infrared radiation, rising from the Earth, and hold this heat in the atmosphere instead of reflecting it back into space. In the 20th century, the increased buildup of carbon dioxide, caused by the burning of fossil fuels, has been a matter of concern. There is some controversy concerning whether the increase noted in the Earth's average temperature is due to the increased amount of carbon dioxide and other gases, or is due to other causes. Volcanic activity, destruction of the rainforests, use of aerosols, and increased agricultural activity may also be contributing factors.
What are the functions of the nervous system?
The nervous system is one of the major regulatory systems of the body, maintaining homeostasis. Its functions are to 1. Monitor the body's internal and external environments, 2. Integrate sensory information, and 3. Direct or coordinate the responses of other organ systems to the sensory input.
What is the Fujita and Pearson tornado scale?
The Fujita and Pearson tornado scale was developed in 1971 by University of Chicago professor T. Theodore Fujita, 1920 to 1998, and Alan Pearson, 1925. Who was then the director of the National Severe Storms Forecast Center. It ranked tornadoes by their wind speed, path, length, and width. Tornadoes are not assessed based on actual wind speed and damage, but rather the scale determines wind speed based on damage. Sometimes known simply as the Fujita scale, the rankings ranged from F0, very weak, to F6, inconceivable. F0 light damage, damage to trees, billboards, and chimneys. F1 moderate damage, mobile homes pushed off their foundations and cars pushed off roads. F2 considerable damage, roofs torn off, mobile homes demolished, and large trees uprooted. F3 severe damage, even well-constructed homes torn apart, trees uprooted, and cars lifted off the ground. F4 devastating damage, houses leveled, cars thrown, and objects become flying missiles. F5 incredible damage, structures lifted off foundations and carried away, cars become missiles. Less than 2% of tornadoes are in this category. F6 and F6 tornado has never been recorded, but we surmise the damage would be devastating.
What are the major groups of organisms in the kingdom Protista?
There is little agreement among taxonomists on how to classify the protists. But they may be conveniently divided into 7 general groups that share certain characteristics of locomotion, nutrition, and reproduction.
What are fractals?
A fractal is a set of points that are too irregular to be described by traditional geometric terms, but that often possess some degree of self-similarity, that is, are made of parts that resemble the whole. They are used in image processing to compress data and to depict apparently chaotic objects in nature such as mountains or coastlines. Scientists also use fractals to better comprehend rainfall trends. Patterns formed by clouds and waves, and the distribution of vegetation. Fractals are also used to create computer-generated art.
Do dogs and cats have good memories?
Dogs do have long-term memories, especially for those whom they love. Cats have a memory for things that are important to their lives. Some cats seem to have extraordinary memories for finding places. Taken away from their homes, they seem able to remember where they live. The key to this homing ability could be a built-in celestial navigation, similar to that used by birds. Or the cat's navigational ability could be attributed to the cat's sensitivity to Earth's magnetic fields. When magnets are attached to cats, their normal navigational skills are disrupted.
How did the discovery of bacteria impact the theory of spontaneous generation?
The theory of spontaneous generation proposes that life can arise spontaneously from non-living matter. One of the first scientists to challenge the theory of spontaneous generation was the Italian physician Francesco Redi, 1626–1698. Redi performed an experiment to show that meat placed in covered containers, either glass-covered or gauze-covered, remained free of maggots, while meat left in an uncovered container eventually became infested with maggots from flies laying their eggs on the meat. After the discovery of microorganisms by Anton von Leeuwenhoek, the controversy surrounding spontaneous generation was renewed. as it had been assumed that food became spoiled by organisms arising spontaneously within food. In 1776 Lazzaro Spallanzani, 1729–1799, showed that no growth occurred in flasks that were boiled after sealing. The controversy over the theory of spontaneous generation was finally resolved in 1861 by Louis Pasteur, 1822–1895. He showed that the microorganisms found in spoiled food were similar to those found in the air. He concluded that the microorganisms that caused food to spoil were from the air and did not spontaneously arise.
How does a mastodon differ from a mammoth?
Although the words are sometimes used interchangeably, the mammoth and the mastodon were two different animals. The mastodon seems to have appeared first, while a side branch may have led to the mammoth. The mastodon lived in Africa, Europe, Asia, and North and South America. It appeared in the Oligocene epoch, 25 to 38 million years ago, and survived until less than 1 million years ago. It stood a maximum of 10 feet, 3 meters, tall and was covered with dense woolly hair. Its tusks were aligned straight forward and were nearly parallel to each other. The mammoth evolved less than 2 million years ago and died out about 10,000 years ago. It lived in North America, Europe, and Asia. Like the mastodon, the mammoth was covered with dense, woolly hair, with a long, coarse layer of outer hair to protect it from the cold. It was somewhat larger than the mastodon, standing 9 to 15 feet, 2.7 to 4.5 meters. The mammoth's tusks tended to spiral outward, then up. The gradual warming of Earth's climate and the change in environment were probably primary factors in the animal's extinction. Early man killed many of them as well, perhaps hastening the process.
Are there specific criteria to prompt the National Weather Service to issue an advisory, watch, or warning?
Certain advisories, watches, or warnings are issued when specific conditions are met, while others will vary by location. Examples of when some common National Weather Service advisories, watches, and warnings issued are: Hurricane Watch, issued when a hurricane poses a possible threat to specific coastal areas, generally within 36 hours. Hurricane Warning, issued when sustained winds of 74 miles per hour, 119 kilometers per hour, or higher associated with a hurricane are expected in a specified coastal area in 24 hours or less. A hurricane warning may remain in effect even when winds are below hurricane force. When dangerously high water and or exceptionally high waves continue to persist.
How many miles of blood vessels are contained in the body?
If they could be laid end to end, the blood vessels, arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins would span about 60,000 miles, 96,500 kilometers. This would be enough to encircle the Earth more than 2 times.
Why do deep-sea divers get the bends?
Bends is a painful condition in the limbs and abdomen. It is caused by the formation and enlargement of bubbles of nitrogen in blood and tissues as a result of rapid reduction of pressure. This condition can develop when a diver ascends too rapidly after being exposed to increased pressure. Severe pain will develop in the muscles and joints of the arms and legs. More severe symptoms include vertigo, nausea, vomiting, choking, shock, and sometimes death. Bends is also known as decompression sickness, caisson disease, tunnel disease, and diver's paralysis. A variety of organisms have been shown to cause PID, including Neisseria gonorrhoeae and such. Common bacteria as Staphylococci, Chlamydia, and coliforms, Pseudomonas and Escherichia coli. Signs and symptoms of PID vary with the site of the infection, but usually include profuse, purulent vaginal discharge, low-grade fever, and malaise, especially within gonorrhoeae infections, and lower abdominal pain. PID is treated with antibiotics. An early diagnosis and treatment will prevent damage to the reproductive system. Severe, untreated PID can result in the development of a pelvic abscess that requires drainage. A ruptured pelvic abscess is a potentially fatal complication, and a patient who develops this complication may require a total hysterectomy.